What is going on, you guys? This is DerekJ Speaks, and we are talking about WWE Survivor Series 2024. Another year of Survivor Series being dominated by two WarGames matches, one for the men and one for the women. And very similarly to recent years, the men's WarGames match was filled with great action and even greater storytelling as the two different sides of the bloodline went to war, with the new bloodline represented by Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu, Tama Tonga, and Bronson Reed taking on Roman Reigns, the Usos, Jimmy and Jay, Sami Zayn, and of course CM Punk in this match, delivering a favor for Paul Heyman. And really, one of the biggest stories of this entire match, even before they were officially in the match, was the tension between CM Punk and Roman Reigns. We saw Punk return to TV to join the team. He and Roman had a sit-down segment on the previous episode of SmackDown, so we knew there was tension between the two of these guys, but we also knew that the reason CM Punk was in this match was because he was helping out a friend in Paul Heyman, who, of course, the wise man Paul Heyman recently returned to TV as well. So that was an underlying story here in this match. At certain points when Roman and his crew were waiting in their cages on the stage to get ready to enter the match, at one point it was time for one of their guys to come in, CM Punk. He was ready to go, but Roman stopped him and then instead had Sami Zayn enter the match. And then a little bit later on, we saw something similar with Solo's team, but that was completely different. That was just more so to hype up Jacob Fatu, who I'll say right now, Jacob Fatu, the MVP of this match. This man is not human. I don't know what he is, but he is an absolute incredible talent and an amazing addition to the roster. And long down the line, when all this bloodline stuff is over, or at least his part of the bloodline is over and he's standing on his own 2 feet, he is going to be a monster heel babyface top star in this company. He was killing it in this match, so kudos to him. Respect to everybody, but in particular, Jacob Fatu was definitely an MVP of this match. But back to what I was saying before, Punk, he just kind of brushed right past Roman Reigns at one point, and he entered the ring and he entered the cage. And then once it became time for Roman Reigns to come out, all the heels who have the advantage in this match, they were already all in the ring. Solo locked the cage with his own lock, apparently. So Roman's only way into the match was to climb up the cage and get into the ring. He was fighting off the other members of the bloodline, the heel bloodline. And once he got in, he dove onto everybody, and that was that. And then he reunited with his crew. He helped up Jimmy. He helped up Jay. He walked right past CM Punk, and then he helped up Sami. And then once Punk got up on his own, he and Roman had a face-to-face. And this brought out Paul Heyman, who was not out there prior to this. He did come out, and he was yelling into the cage. He was yelling at both Punk and Roman to team up, and they're better together, and trying to motivate them. And at that point, it was an all-out brawl. As you know, with WarGames, the match is not official until all 10 men are in the ring. So you get a lot of brawling, you get a lot of the weapons, you get dominance with one team dominating the other team, especially if it's the heels over the baby faces. You get spots like that. So a lot of that just was what it was. The fans weren't super enthusiastic about it. It was just a bunch of spots happening. It was fine. But once the match officially started, everyone's in the ring. It's all out chaos. That's when a lot of the big highlights for me started to happen. Case in point, at one point, Roman Reigns was about to get Samoan spiked by Solo. Meanwhile, CM Punk has Jacob Fatu on his shoulders about to deliver a GTS. Roman avoids the spike, goes back, goes for a spear on Solo, but Solo moves out of the way, and then Roman accidentally takes out CM Punk. And that got a big dramatic reaction from the crowd, but luckily it did not play too big of a role, at least in terms of causing further dissension between these two. In fact, CM Punk saved Roman Reigns a little bit later on. Bronson Reed had Roman laid out on a table in the ring, and he scaled to the very top of the cage, getting ready to deliver probably the biggest tsunami splash of his career. And as he came crashing down, CM Punk at the very last minute pulled Roman Reigns out of the way. Bronson Reed crashed right through the table, and that was it for Bronson Reed throughout the rest of the match. I don't think he played a major factor anymore throughout the rest of the match. And at that point, Roman Reigns, he's getting his wits about him. He's getting back up, and he looks over, and he extends his hand to CM Punk to help him up. But, of course, that instantly got interrupted by Jacob Fatu, who laid out both of them with super kicks until he got taken out by both Usos. So we did get a Usos reunion in this match too. It was cool seeing them do their big moves again, and the crowd was going crazy for it. We saw it a little bit in the build-up, like in the pre-start of the match, that brawling section there, and the crowd wasn't all that hot into it. But here down the stretch, as a lot of the big action is starting to climax and all that, they were really getting into it. And they got into it when they delivered a double super kick to Jacob Fatu and laid him out with the 1D. And we see Sami Zayn, he laid out Tama Tonga with the Blue Thunder Bomb. And then Jimmy Uso, he now goes to the very top of the cage. He comes down with an Uso splash onto Jacob Fatu right through a table, and Tonga Loa was there. I just noticed that I didn't really mention him. He didn't play much of a factor in this match. He was just kind of there, which is his role. But there's my obligatory mention of Tonga Loa. But the big finish came when Sami, Jimmy, Jay, they all collect themselves. They go from one ring into the other ring, and they're helping up their other comrades in there. The Usos, they're helping up Roman. Sami's helping up Punk. All five men are now standing together, and they have surrounded Solo Sikoa, who is outnumbered. He's outgunned. He is basically ready to fall. And at that moment, Roman spreads his arms out, and he's basically welcoming Solo back, giving him a chance to fall back in line, acknowledge him, all that stuff. But Solo, defiant, he says that he is the true tribal chief, and he gets laid out with double super kicks from the Usos. He gets hit with a haluva kick in the corner from Sami, and then he gets hit with a GTS from Punk, and then a spear from Roman Reigns to get the win. So the baby faces, if you can call them that, at least in terms of Roman, he's not exactly a baby face, but in this case, Team Roman gets the win, and everyone's hugging each other. There's a big group hugs and all that. And then finally, Punk and Roman come face to face. The other three are standing right behind them. You see Paul Heyman standing on the outside of the cage, smiling. And Roman and Punk both come in for their handshake. And then they pose. And each man, as they exit the cage, they are met at the bottom of the steps by Paul Heyman to hug them and give them a handshake. Heyman gives Punk a hug, and Punk reminds him about a favor, because he said that he was doing this favor for Paul Heyman to be in this match and to have the OG Bloodline's back. But he did mention that he will eventually cash in a favor from Heyman. So We don't know what that is. I'm sure we probably won't know immediately. I'm sure we won't find out on Raw or next week or even next month. That is something way down the line. And then everyone posed on stage, and that was it. To me, I was very shocked that no one came out. We didn't get any big surprise ending. It was just the babyfaces standing tall. I didn't have a lot of expectations that we would see The Rock. I know people were floating that out there, especially after what happened at Bad Blood, but we didn't get The Rock. I was more surprised that we didn't get any appearance from Seth Rollins. Of course, leading up to this show, Seth Rollins was one of the guys who the OG Bloodline were trying to recruit, and he told them no many times. And then not only is Bronson Reed on the other side of the heel team, but then CM Punk comes back, and we all know the history between Punk and Rollins, and I'm sure many people are predicting that we're going to get a collision course between the two of them heading into WrestleMania next year. So we didn't get any Rollins on TV in recent weeks, but that might be something that starts up coming soon. But as for the match, like I said, everything before the match started and before everyone was in the ring, it was fine. They were telling stories, and even the stuff over on the stage with Roman and Punk, that all served a purpose to lead all the way up to the finish. So that was fine. But once the match actually got going, you got all the big action, that is when things really kicked into higher gear. And like I said, going forward now, I have no idea where this story goes. I will say that this is yet another big loss for Solo Sikoa, the self-proclaimed tribal chief of his new bloodline. So at some point you would think that would have some kind of consequence for him. He failed in his 2 chances at the WWE Championship. He did beat Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel earlier this month, but he also lost to Roman Reigns at Bad Blood the previous month, and he just lost to Roman Reigns again here. He led his team into war and he lost. He does still possess the Ulafala, so he is technically still the tribal chief in this case scenario, but I'm very curious to see if they will address the fact that he has been losing so much. Because on the surface here, everything with this bloodline story has been building up to Survivor Series. It's been building up to this match where we get a reunion of the Usos and Roman and Sami on one side going up against Solo and his crew on the other side. And you can quibble and, take issue with how they got there and, the different routes that they took to get to this particular match. But this is what's been building up to ever since the post-WrestleMania edition of SmackDown, when Solo Sikoa brought in Tama Tonga, took out Jimmy Uso, stomped on Paul Heyman's phone, to bringing in Tonga Loa, bringing in Jacob Fatu, and Roman returning and doing all this stuff. Everything has been building up to this match at Survivor Series. People have been calling for this WarGames match for months now. Now we finally got it. Now it was finally here. It happened. It's over. Where do we go from here? What's up next? I don't know. I mentioned The Rock. I don't know what factor The Rock is going to play in things moving forward. I have no idea. And I kind of like that we don't know for sure. This almost felt like a blow-off in a way, but clearly it's not. So I'm very curious to see how things move forward from here. And this match was great. It was probably the best match of the night, but it was not the only match on this night. But it was the only match that truly mattered. This show had other stuff on it, but this entire show was built around this match with the Bloodline. This is what was the most heavily promoted match on the show. This is what the entire show was built around. Like I said, people have been calling this match for months now. So this is the entire promotion for this show, was this match. So everything else kind of fell flat in comparison. Case in point, the opening match of the show was the women's WarGames match. The biggest issue with this match being it probably should not have been a WarGames match. This is how they started the show with Team Rhea Ripley against Team Liv Morgan. And, respect to all the women involved. They busted their asses out there. They worked hard. There were some crazy spots in there. Props to Io Sky out there. She had one of the best spots of the entire night when she went all the way up to the top of the cage. And we've seen her do this, especially with her trash cans. And she dives off and she hits her moonsaults. In this case, she had a special spray painted trash can that she put over her head and basically covering her entire top half of her body. And she dove off with a moonsault down onto a pile of bodies in the ring. Meanwhile, on the other ring on the top of the cage, Tiffany Stratton was up top and she came down with a swanton on a different pile of people. So that was cool. Spots like that was cool. And even the finish, when it came down to all the commotion down the stretch of this match, at one point Tiffany Stratton threatened to cash in with her briefcase. We had Liv Morgan and Nia Jax both down in the ring. She threatened to cash in her briefcase. But of course, Raquel Rodriguez caught her. And then it got all broken up by Io, who had a fire extinguisher and just sprayed it all over everyone. So that broke it up. The heels at one point, they were ganging up on Rhea. Liv was just bashing her in the gut with a baseball bat, which Rhea didn't really sell that much when the match was over, but that's neither here nor there. They did introduce handcuffs to use against Rhea, but they ended up being used on Raquel. Raquel got handcuffed for the final minutes of the match, which allowed for the finish to take place, which was Rhea and Liv on the top rope, and Liv was going for the Oblivion, but then it got countered into a Riptide. So Rhea hit the Riptide off the top, down through a table, and pinned the world champion to get the win for her team. So the babyfaces win. Rhea, Io, Bianca Belair, Naomi, and of course Bayley, who replaced the injured, put that in quotation marks, Jade Cargill. We'll see how that story plays out. The match itself, it was fine, but there were some rough spots in there. I don't really want to go through every single element of this match. It was just very slow and sluggish at points, and I am not a fan of people coming out and it's their time to enter the match, and before they get in the ring, they have to gather a whole bunch of weapons from under the ring and put them in there. They did it at least once in the men's match, but really they didn't do it that much, and they just relied on their own stuff. They had weapons, like I said, they did it at least once, but with the women, it felt like every single person coming out first has to stop and then go under the ring and then grab a weapon and put it in the ring. Or they're struggling to find weapons because they're not placed in the correct spots underneath the ring. So they got to find them first, and they got to scavenge and all that stuff. It slowed it down, and really everything about this match just it did not need to be in WarGames. I know Rhea and Liv is the top women's story in the entire company on both shows, so in theory it does make sense for the two of them who are in this heated rivalry with each other to form their own teams and go to WarGames and all that, but the way they built up to it and just how sudden it felt, it did not need to be in WarGames. It looks like Triple H has completely done away with doing traditional elimination matches at Survivor Series. That's what the show used to be built around, as far back as when I was a kid. Not in the old days. By the time I became a fan, they had only started doing like one or two, but you at least always had one or two of those matches. There were a couple years where you didn't get any, like 2002 you didn't get any, and that's considered by many to be one of the best Survivor Series shows of all time. But outside of that, you at least get one or two, and nowadays with WarGames, it seems like that's the attraction. That is the prize. And it doesn't need to be that way. You can throw a traditional elimination match in there if you want to. This match would have been perfect for that. And because it wasn't, and you had that plus a very weak build heading into this match, and the crowd that just wasn't overly enthusiastic about everything in this match, you get a pretty weak, lame WarGames match. It was a waste of the stipulation, which you only do it, well, you do it every single year, which is a whole other issue, that WarGames does not have to be every single year. Again, I understand this is the selling point for Survivor Series now. This is what this show is now. They build around WarGames. They do their big video packages. They play Black Sabbath's War Pigs to death on TV and in the video packages. I get that. But if you're going to do it when it makes sense. On this show, you had it for the men. You had it for the Bloodline. It was tailor-made for those guys. You didn't need to do it for the women. You don't need to do these matches based on gender, because you do one for the men and one for the women. A match like WarGames should be done because it makes sense to do it, because you have a story and a feud that requires a proper blow off or some type of further development, that you do need WarGames. So maybe scale it back to just one a year. And if come 2025, it makes sense for the only WarGames match on the entire show to be all women, because you have a story with the women that requires it, I'm all for it. I don't want to force the men in there either. If you have a story that's that heated and that intense and it's all women, perfect. I will support that as being the only WarGames match on the show. But I know I'm wasting my breath because they're not going to do that. So the women's WarGames match, it was fine. I'm sure other people on the internet were much more harsh about it than I will be, but there was that. And then outside of the two WarGames matches, you had 3 undercard matches that all ranged in varying degrees of quality. We had the United States Championship on the line, LA Knight defending against the returning Shinsuke Nakamura, who has this whole new vibe about him, this whole almost samurai-like attire and entrance gear. He has new theme music. He has a new look with the face paint and all that. And so far, it has been paying dividends for him because it led him to win the United States Championship in this match. The commentators were building up from the very beginning, all the way from the entrances. When LA Knight was making his entrance, at one point, he dropped the U.S. title belt during his entrance. He dropped it on the ground. Now, could that have been a mistake? Sure. But Corey Graves was very quick to mention how, you see, that's a perfect example of how LA Knight is off his game right now. So maybe it was a mistake, and Corey Graves was quick on his feet to incorporate that into the story that they were trying to tell, with LA Knight being thrown off and Nakamura's in his head and he's overthinking things and he's all whacked out. But that's what they were pushing all throughout this entire match, and in the end, that was his downfall. They were fighting in that area where there's the steel support beam to hold up the 2 rings. Knight was going for a suplex, but Nakamura raked his eye, hit him with a reverse DDT on the steel, and then got him back in the ring and hit him with a Kinshasa to the back of his head to get the win. So Nakamura is the United States champion. Am I confident that this is leading to some big renewed push and they're going to put a lot of focus on Nakamura? And as I am recording this, I'm looking up at the TV and I see the post-show scrum, and I see CM Punk at the post-show scrum eating cookies. And that gives me war flashbacks to his days in AEW, that haunted, cursed media scrum a couple of years ago, aka the beginning of the end for AEW in many people's eyes. So that just threw me off. But anyway, back to Nakamura. I don't have full faith that this is going to be some strong push for him. I mean, they're going all out right now with the new music and everything, and they put the belt on him. But it's not a doubt in my mind, LA Knight's just going to win that belt right back. How soon? I don't know. They have Saturday night's main event coming up soon. They have the New Year. They have the Rumble. I'm sure he's going to get that belt back pretty soon. But this is something for him to do. He got thrown off. He got thrown off his game, and now he has to chase Nakamura to get his championship back and get his head on straight. So I think Nakamura is a placeholder champion. I can't really call him a placeholder champion because the person he beat for the title is probably the same person who's going to beat him to get the belt back. But again, I've been down this road with Nakamura so many times where I have no trust that they are that serious about really pushing him. So we'll see how far it goes, but I don't have a lot of faith that it'll go that far. But anyway, up next, we had the Intercontinental Championship on the line in a triple threat match. Braun Breaker, Sheamus, and Ludwig Kaiser. So this was the third match on the show. Up to this point, we had the Women's WarGames match, which really, outside of the last 5 or so minutes, was not all that exciting. You had the crowd popped for the U.S. title change, but the match, it just followed a long WarGames match, so the crowd was very tired, and they didn't really care that much because it was Nakamura in the match, and they have been conditioned to not care that much about Nakamura. So up to this point, the show was off to a very rough start. So this needed a jolt of energy, and thus these three men came in and did that. These guys went out there and had a wild, stiff brawl. These guys were kicking each other's asses, and it was very enjoyable. Braun Breaker, Sheamus, and Ludwig Kaiser, all three men were killing it out there. Sheamus had the battle scars. He got brutalized by Kaiser with a shillelagh down the stretch in this match. And there were some good near falls over the course of this match. Some good spots and moments where it looked like we were going to get a title change, specifically for Sheamus, who had Braun Breaker down with the bro kick. But then Ludwig Kaiser came in and pulled the referee out of the ring. And that's when he beat down on Sheamus with the shillelagh. So then we get to the finish. Kaiser lays out Sheamus with a DDT, and then Braun Breaker gets back up and spears the soul out of Kaiser. And then he is gearing up for a spear on Sheamus. And they did this in a way where so much time is passing. They're really building up this moment where you think Sheamus is going to bust out and hit a bro kick and win the championship. But no, that's not what happened. Braun did hit the spear, and he pinned Sheamus, which was also shocking to me because I thought for sure Kaiser was the one who was going to get pinned, and that was one of the reasons he was even in this match to begin with. But Sheamus is the one who got pinned, and Braun Breaker retained his championship. But I can't be mad at a match like this or a finish like that because this was great. I love Braun Breaker. I'm glad to see that they are keeping the belt on him a little bit longer. As much as I want to see Sheamus finish his story and win that championship, now would not have been the right time to do it. So maybe they can hold off and build this back around towards WrestleMania where he can finally do it there. But again, been down this road in the past with Sheamus and Gunther where it looked like they were going to do it at a WrestleMania and they did not. So his time will come someday. But good for Sheamus also that he has been killing it in TV matches all year. I don't review the weekly shows, so I don't really get a chance to talk that much about Sheamus, but he's been killing it in a lot of these TV matches he's been having against Drew McIntyre or Kaiser or Breaker or Pete Dunne, all across the board with so many different people all year. So it was good to see him finally get a match on a PLE. So great stuff there. And then finally, the World Heavyweight Championship was on the line. Gunther defending against Damian Priest, a rematch from SummerSlam where Gunther beat Damian Priest due to an assist from Finn Balor. And in this match here in November at Survivor Series, Gunther defeats Damian Priest with an assist from Finn Balor. Wasn't a fan of that. The match itself, that was pretty good. Heading into this match, they've been telling the story of Gunther lacking confidence in himself, and Priest has basically been overconfident. So Gunther's been really down on himself, but heading into this match and as the match was progressing, Gunther was very strong. He was giving it to Priest, and Priest was giving it right back to him. They had very good chemistry. Things started out a little bit slow, but they were building up, and it got pretty good down the stretch. But then we reached the finish where both men are on the top rope. They slip and fall. I don't know if this was a botch or not, but they're both down. Priest, who was selling an arm injury all throughout the match, he's telling the referee to give him a second and wait. So the referee goes back into the ring because Priest fell to the outside. He's laying down flat on his back. The referee goes back in the ring, checking on Gunther, has his back turned. Then a commotion rises in the crowd, so it's like, oh boy, where's Finn Balor? And so Finn Balor comes gunning through the crowd, leaps over the barricade, gets on the apron, or the steel steps, either way, and dives off and hits a coup de grace on Priest on the floor. And then as Balor's out there, Gunther gets back up. He goes to the outside. He boots Balor right in the face, basically saying, I don't want your help. Then he tosses Priest back in the ring, gives him a power bomb, gives him a bunch of elbow shots, and then locks him in a sleeper hold, and Priest passes out, and Gunther retains the championship. Again, not a fan of them basically doing the exact same finish at SummerSlam. I figured this is the direction they were going in because Balor has been obsessed with Priest for months now, ever since Priest beat him at Bad Blood. Well, I guess it's been over a month, but he beat him at Bad Blood, and that was seemingly it. But Balor's been name-dropping Priest for weeks now, so you had to know that this was going to be the outcome here. It was still just so lame. And even with the story they were telling with Gunther and Priest, because the reason Priest was as confident as he was heading into this match, and Gunther was so down, he was poking at that, is the fact that recalling back to their SummerSlam match, Priest knew that the only reason Gunther won is because Finn Balor screwed over Damian Priest. And so heading into this match, one would think and surmise that Gunther would be able to get his mojo back, basically, by getting a clean victory over Priest. That is what I was hoping for. We did not get that. So I don't know if down the line we're going to get another match between Priest and Gunther. Maybe we'll get a triple threat and throw Balor in there, especially since there was some physicality between Balor and Gunther here. Maybe. But honestly, that's probably for the best. The only way I could really accept another match between Priest and Gunther, or even Priest and Balor at that point, is if they do a triple threat. Hell, make the triple threat a match for Saturday night's main event. They already have a WWE title match on that show with Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens, which, by the way, I would totally put the championship on Kevin Owens in that match. If you want another world title match on that show, do Gunther, Priest, and Balor in a triple threat, and let Gunther beat both men fair and square, straight up, at the same time, and let him move on, and let all of them move on. Honestly, coming out of this show, another thing, Rhea pinned Liv in the WarGames match. We have Balor screwing over Priest again here. This stuff with the Judgment Day feuding with each other, and all the stuff with Rhea and Priest and Balor and Liv and Dom and all this stuff, it was cool a couple months ago, but now it's November. It's time for this stuff to wrap up. So let Priest be done with Balor and put that belt back on Rhea and let her be done with Liv, and let's all just move on. There's already stuff they're building up internally with the Judgment Day between Balor and Dirty Dom. So let that stuff play out. But let's please hurry up and move on with all this stuff so everybody can move away from each other. But that covers it for this show. So top to bottom, it was a good show. I wouldn't call it one of the better PLEs of the year, but the triple threat match and that men's WarGames main event really saved the show. They held the show together, and they were good enough, especially that main event, to make this show a thumbs up for me. The closing minutes of the opening match, the shock of Nakamura winning the title, and everything that Gunther and Priest were doing prior to the finish, I guess can all be considered good stuff too, but they're bogged down by all the bad that's associated with them. But the triple threat and the men's WarGames, if you're gonna go back and watch anything from this show, those are things that definitely stand out for me personally. But what about you guys? What do you think? If you like what you see and you like what you hear, hit the like button, subscribe, comment down below, and follow me on Twitter/X at DerekJ Speaks. Next time I'll be talking to you guys will probably be for Saturday night's main event. Like I said, Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes for the WWE Championship is already official. So we'll see what else is added to that show. We'll crown the first ever women's U.S. champion on that show. So that'll be a big event on TV. And then after that, we have AEW World's End with the culmination of the Continental Classic, which is already the best thing on AEW television. And it's only been a week, and it's already been a burst of life that this show has needed every single week. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this tournament plays out for them. And then after that, it's the end of the month, end of the year. Going to be putting together a top 20 list of the best matches of the year. And then we head into 2025, where we have the Raw debut on Netflix. We got the Rumble, and not too long after that, we got WrestleMania in Vegas. So all that stuff coming up in the future, and I will try my best to be here to cover all of it for you guys. Appreciate you all coming back and listening to me blabber on about pro wrestling. Definitely appreciate it. And that's about it. So hopefully you all have a good day, good night, afternoon, whatever. Take care.